The courtroom was silent as Judge Amelia Miller prepared to deliver her verdict. She looked over her glasses at the man standing before her. The defendant, a wealthy businessman accused of fraud. His lawyer had tried everything to twist the case in his favor, but Amelia had seen through his lies. She cleared her throat and spoke, her voice firm and unwavering. Justice is not only for the rich. The law treats everyone equally. I hereby sentence you to 5 years in prison and a fine of $200,000. The defendant's face turned pale. His lawyer tried to protest, but Amelia had already banged the gavel. The case was over. As she rose from her seat, whispers filled the courtroom. Some lawyers admired her fairness, while others feared her strict approach. Amelia Miller was known as a no-nonsense judge, someone who could not be influenced by power or money. She was respected in the legal world and feared by criminals who thought they could escape justice. But outside the courtroom, Amelia was simply a mother. She stepped into her office and sighed, rubbing her temples. A long day in court always left her exhausted. As she reached for her phone, a small smile appeared on her lips. There was only one thing that made her feel better: her daughter, Sky. She dialed the nanny's number. "Is Sky home from school?" "Yes, ma'am. She's finishing her homework," the nanny replied. "Good. I'll be home soon." Amelia put down her phone and took a deep breath. Sky was the most important part of her life. Everything Amelia did was for her. Life had not always been this way. 5 years ago, Amelia had a happy family. She was married to Daniel Miller, a loving husband and a caring father to Sky. Back then, Amelia was not just a judge. She was a wife, a woman who laughed freely and had dreams of growing old with the man she loved. But fate had other plans. One rainy evening, Daniel was driving home from work when his car skidded off the road and crashed into a tree. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. The moment Amelia received the phone call, her world collapsed. She had rushed to the hospital, hoping it was a mistake. But when she saw Daniel's lifeless body, reality hit her like a storm. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But then she saw Sky, her little girl, only 7 years old, standing in the hospital hallway, holding a stuffed rabbit, her big brown eyes filled with confusion. "Where's Daddy?" Sky had asked softly. Amelia had knelt beside her, fighting back tears. "Daddy is gone, sweetheart. But he'll come back, right?" Amelia couldn't answer. Instead, she pulled Sky into a tight embrace, whispering, "I'll never leave you. I promise." That night, Amelia locked herself in her bedroom and sobbed until there were no more tears left. But by morning, she wiped her face and put on a brave front for Sky. Being a single mother and a judge was not easy. Amelia had to balance court cases, legal battles, and raising a child all at once. There were days when she came home exhausted, but no matter how tired she was, she always made time for Sky. She helped with homework, read bedtime stories, and held her daughter close whenever she had nightmares. She made sure Sky never felt alone. But there were also challenges. Sky would sometimes ask, "Why don't other kids' moms work so much?" Or worse, "Why did Daddy leave us?" Each time, Amelia would smile and say, "Daddy didn't leave us on purpose. He's watching over us, baby, and I'll always be here for you." Over the years, Amelia became stronger, not just as a judge, but as a mother. She built a life where nothing could harm Sky. She made sure her daughter was safe, loved, and protected. She thought she had overcome the worst pain life could throw at her. But Amelia didn't know that an even darker storm was on its way, one that would test her strength like never before. And this time, she would not just be a judge. She would become an executioner. 2 years after Daniel's death, Amelia focused on her career and raising Sky. She had no interest in love again until she met Mark Adams, a gym trainer. They met when Amelia's friend convinced her to join a gym. Mark was her trainer, charismatic, supportive, and always encouraging. Over time, their conversations extended beyond fitness. Amelia found comfort in his presence, and he made her feel alive again. Amelia hesitated to introduce Mark to Sky, but when she finally did, he won her trust quickly. "I hear you love drawing," Mark said. Sky nodded. "Why don't you draw a picture of me? I'd love to see how I look through your eyes." That small gesture was enough to break the ice. Mark played games with her, helped with her schoolwork, and soon, Sky became comfortable around him. One day, she told Amelia, "Mom, Mark is really nice. I like him." That was all Amelia needed to hear. A year later, Mark proposed. "I love you, Amelia. And I love Sky, too. I want to be there for both of you." Amelia said yes, believing she had found a second chance at happiness. They had a simple wedding, and for the first time in years, Amelia felt hopeful. She thought she was building a perfect family, but she had no idea what was coming. 6 months had passed since Amelia married Mark. For the first time in years, she felt like life was coming together again. The house felt warmer, livelier. Laughter filled the rooms, and Amelia started to believe she had made the right choice. Mark had settled into his role as a husband and stepfather. He helped with chores, cooked dinner sometimes, and made sure Amelia didn't overwork herself. More importantly, he was good to Sky, or at least that's what Amelia thought. The family did things together, trips to amusement parks, picnics by the lake, movie nights at home. Amelia had always been too busy with work to plan vacations before, but Mark convinced her that they needed time together. Their first trip was to a beach resort in Florida. Sky was excited to see the ocean for the first time. Mark taught her how to swim while Amelia sat on the sand, watching them. For a moment, everything felt perfect. "Mom, look, I can float," Sky shouted, laughing as Mark held her up in the water. Amelia smiled. This is what family is supposed to feel like, she thought. Back at home, Mark made efforts to bond with Sky. He helped her with homework, took her to the park, and even let her help him cook sometimes. Amelia was relieved. Sky was no longer growing up without a father figure. Before Mark, Amelia had been stuck in grief and routine. She woke up, worked long hours in court, came home exhausted, and repeated the same cycle. But now life had more meaning. One night, after putting Sky to bed, Amelia sat with Mark on the couch. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," she admitted. Mark smiled, pulling her close. "That's because you're not alone anymore. We're in this together." She believed him. She let her guard down, trusting that she had finally rebuilt her family. Despite the happiness, Amelia noticed small changes in Sky. At times, she seemed distant, lost in thought. She no longer ran into Amelia's arms when she came home from work. Sometimes, when Mark hugged her, Sky's body stiffened slightly before forcing a smile. "How's everything, sweetheart?" Amelia asked one evening. "I'm okay," Sky replied quickly, forcing a grin. Amelia thought maybe she was still adjusting to having a stepfather. "She just needs time," she told herself. But the signs were there, subtle but present, and Amelia didn't see them for what they truly were. Not yet. It was a typical evening after a long day in court. Amelia walked through the door, feeling the weight of her work lift as she heard her daughter's voice calling out from the living room. "Mom, you're home." Sky ran into her arms, and Amelia smiled, feeling that familiar warmth she'd missed during the day. The bond between mother and daughter had grown stronger over the years, and Amelia cherished their moments together. "How is school, sweetie?" Amelia asked, as Sky led her toward the living room to play. They shared some quiet moments, laughing and chatting about the little things, Sky's friends, her new interests, and how the day had gone. Amelia was grateful for the peace and comfort of home, thinking everything was finally falling into place. But as they sat together, something in the air shifted. Amelia didn't notice at first, but Sky seemed quieter than usual, her small fingers nervously tapping the edge of the coffee table. Then, Sky spoke, her voice filled with an odd uncertainty. "Mom, will you ever leave me like Daddy did?" Amelia froze, the words echoing in her mind. Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, honey?" Amelia asked softly, her eyes searching Sky's face for an answer. Sky looked down, avoiding Amelia's gaze. "Mark, he told me that you might leave me if I told you," Sky whispered, barely above a whisper. Amelia's pulse quickened, and her breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what Sky was referring to, but something in her gut told her this wasn't just an innocent comment. "What did he say, sweetheart?" Amelia asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Sky hesitated, twisting her hands in her lap. She looked up at Amelia, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and confusion. "He said, if I tell you what he does to me when you're at work, you'll leave me like Daddy did." The words hit Amelia like a slap. She struggled to hold herself together, not wanting to alarm Sky, but inside, her entire world was crumbling. She instinctively pulled Sky closer to her, holding her tight. "What does he do, sweetie? Please tell me." Sky's voice quivered as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "When you're gone, he comes into my room. He touches me, Mom, on my chest and between my legs." Amelia's blood ran cold. Her mind raced, trying to comprehend what her daughter was telling her. The person she trusted, the man she had welcomed into their family, was hurting her child. Her body trembled with a wave of anger, confusion, and devastation. Amelia felt the urge to scream, to confront Mark right then and there. But she couldn't. She needed to stay calm for Sky. She gently wiped the tears from her daughter's face, her own heart breaking as she realized the true horror of what was happening in her home. "Sky," Amelia whispered, trying to steady her voice, "you did the right thing by telling me. I will never leave you. I love you, and I promise I'm going to make sure you're safe." Sky nodded, burying her face in her mother's chest, her small body shaking. Amelia held her tightly, her heart torn between overwhelming anger and a fierce protective instinct for her daughter. At that moment, Amelia knew she had to make sure Mark never hurt Sky again. She would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant taking matters into her own hands. No one, not even the person she once trusted most, would stand in the way of her daughter's safety. Amelia sat in her living room, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The words her daughter, Sky, had told her still echoed in her ears, replaying over and over again. Mark, her husband, had been abusing Sky, the one person Amelia loved most in this world. The revelation had shattered her. She felt an overwhelming rage coursing through her, but more than that, a desperate need to protect her daughter. As a judge, Amelia had spent her career making sure justice was served. She had worked tirelessly in the courtroom, upholding the law and making decisions that affected people's lives. She knew the importance of the justice system, but now, for the first time, she questioned it. Could the system truly protect her daughter? Could it provide the justice she wanted for Sky? Or would Mark, with his charm and strength, manipulate the system like so many others had? Amelia's first instinct was to confront Mark, to scream at him, to make him feel the weight of his actions. But she quickly dismissed this idea. Mark was strong. He was a gym trainer, fit and capable of defending himself. Amelia, on the other hand, was not physically imposing. She knew she couldn't overpower him, and if she tried, it would only lead to more violence and potentially more harm to Sky. But the more Amelia thought about it, the more the idea of going to the police seemed like a distant option. She knew how long legal cases took. They could drag on for months, even years, and during that time, Mark might continue abusing Sky. What if he manipulated the system? What if he used his charm to convince everyone that Amelia was just a jealous wife, making false accusations? What if he got away with it, freed on bail or some technicality, only to return and hurt Sky again? The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Amelia knew the justice system was not perfect. It was slow and often flawed. She could report him, but what would be the result? A long investigation, court hearings, legal battles that would make Mark untouchable for months, maybe years. Meanwhile, Sky would still be at risk. The thought made Amelia's stomach turn. She realized, with growing clarity, that she couldn't rely on the system to protect her daughter. No one could guarantee that Mark would face the punishment he deserved. And worse, what if the case never even went to court? What if Mark walked free and continued to hurt Sky? Amelia sat motionless, staring at her hands. Her fists were clenched, and her chest heaved with every breath. She had to do something. The rage was consuming her, the need to protect Sky overwhelming everything else. She wanted to kill Mark. She wanted him gone, out of their lives for good. She wanted him to feel the same fear he had instilled in her daughter, but the thought of actually going through with it left her conflicted. But she had no choice, she realized. Mark could not be allowed to continue. He had to be stopped permanently. As a judge, Amelia understood the consequences of taking justice into her own hands. But the law had failed her before. It had failed Sky. It wasn't enough to report him. She needed to act. If she didn't, who would protect Sky? Amelia wiped the tears from her eyes, her hands shaking. The idea of taking Mark's life seemed unthinkable at first, but now, the more she thought about it, the more the plan took shape in her mind. She could do it. She was smart, and she knew how to cover her tracks. She could make sure he was never able to hurt Sky again. As Amelia sat there, the idea of murder began to settle in her mind. She thought back to the times when Mark had been kind to her, when he had swept her off her feet after the death of her first husband. But that man was gone now, replaced by a stranger. A monster who had manipulated her love and trust, only to hurt the one person she cherished more than anything. The plan began to form. It needed to be perfect. There could be no mistakes. Amelia couldn't afford to leave any evidence behind. It needed to look like an accident, something that wouldn't lead the police back to her. She knew Mark's schedule well. He went to the gym every morning, worked with clients, and returned home in the evenings. Amelia had time. She could act when he was least expecting it. It would have to be quick, precise. She would need to catch him when he was vulnerable, when he wasn't prepared to defend himself. Amelia didn't want to leave anything to chance. The first thing she considered was how to subdue him without alerting him to her intentions. She couldn't fight him physically. He was too strong. But what if she could make him fall asleep? What if she could use something to incapacitate him temporarily? She thought about medications, something she already had at home, sleeping pills. She kept a bottle in the medicine cabinet for when she had trouble sleeping. It was strong enough to knock someone out for hours, and it was something she could easily slip into his food or drink. If she could make him fall into a deep sleep, it would give her the time she needed to carry out her plan. Her mind raced as she worked through the details. She would wait until Mark was home, exhausted after a long day at the gym. She would prepare his favorite meal, something that would make him feel at ease, something that wouldn't raise any suspicion. The pills would be dissolved into his food or drink, and once he fell asleep, she would do what she had to do. But even as she planned, doubts crept in. What if she made a mistake? What if something went wrong? What if he didn't fall asleep like she hoped? What if he woke up too soon? Or worse, what if he fought back? The fear gnawed at Amelia's insides. She didn't want to kill him. She didn't want to become a murderer. But the thought of losing Sky, of seeing her suffer more at Mark's hands, was unbearable. Amelia felt trapped between the rage inside her and the law she had sworn to uphold. But in her heart, she knew there was no other choice. If she didn't act, Mark would continue to hurt Sky, and that was something Amelia could not allow. She had to protect her daughter, no matter the cost. The evening had come, and everything was set in motion. Amelia stood in the kitchen, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared dinner for Mark. The house was quiet, save for the sound of the knife chopping vegetables, a rhythm that helped calm her nerves. She had been planning this for days, every step carefully thought out. There was no turning back now. Amelia had already decided on Mark's favorite meal, spaghetti and meatballs. It would be simple, comforting, and familiar. She knew Mark would enjoy it and wouldn't question anything. As she stirred the sauce on the stove, she reached for the bottle of sleeping pills in the cabinet. They were strong enough to knock him out cold, just as she had planned. It only took a small amount, and Amelia knew that once he ate, it wouldn't be long before he fell into a deep sleep. With steady hands, Amelia crushed the pills, mixing them into the sauce. The powder dissolved quickly, and she made sure it was evenly spread so that Mark wouldn't taste anything unusual. She stirred the pot, making sure the sauce smelled just as it always did. There was no room for error. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she set the table, her mind focused on the task at hand. Mark would eat, fall asleep, and then she could finish what she had started. When Mark finally arrived home, he walked into the kitchen with his usual energy. He smiled when he saw the meal on the table, and he complimented Amelia, telling her how much he had been looking forward to a nice dinner. His voice, once full of warmth, now sounded almost distant to Amelia. She forced a smile and nodded, trying to push the dread that was slowly building inside her to the back of her mind. Mark sat down at the table and began eating. He didn't suspect anything, of course. Why would he? He was oblivious to the carefully crafted plan that had been put into motion. Amelia sat across from him, her gaze fixed on his every move. She tried to act normal, to hold a conversation, but her mind was elsewhere. Every moment felt like it stretched on forever. Mark ate quickly, clearly hungry after a long day at the gym. Amelia watched as he finished his plate and reached for more. The pills were already working. She could see it in his eyes. He was starting to look drowsy. His movements became slower, his words slurred slightly. Amelia felt a cold rush of relief as she watched him begin to fade. "Are you okay, Mark?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," he mumbled, his head nodding. "Just a little tired, I guess." That was all Amelia needed to hear. She got up from the table and quietly made her way to the hallway closet. Inside, hidden behind the coats, was a strong rope she had purchased earlier. She took it into her hands, feeling the weight of it, the reality of what she was about to do. Her breath hitched in her throat, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the only way. She returned to the kitchen to find Mark slumped in his chair, his eyes half closed, breathing heavily. He had fallen into a deep sleep, just as she had hoped. Amelia stood over him for a moment, looking at his lifeless form. He had hurt Sky, destroyed everything Amelia held dear. This was the only way to protect her daughter from a monster he had become. Amelia's hands trembled as she looped the rope around Mark's neck. She had never imagined herself in this position, never thought she would be the one to end a life. But now, with Mark's abuse still fresh in her mind, and the love she had for Sky burning strong in her heart, she knew there was no other choice. She pulled the rope tight, slowly and methodically, her breath quickening with each pull. Mark did not stir. His body, still and lifeless, was no longer a threat. The weight of his existence had been extinguished in that one moment. As Amelia continued, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Part of her felt relief, knowing that Mark could no longer hurt Sky. Part of her felt grief for the man he had been, for the moments they had shared, even if they were now tainted by his betrayal. But above all, there was a deep sadness, a sorrow that she had come to this point. She hadn't wanted this. But in the face of Mark's cruelty, Amelia had seen no other option. The seconds felt like hours as Amelia tightened her grip, waiting for the life to leave his body. His chest stopped rising and falling, his limbs grew stiff, and his face turned pale. The man who had once swept her off her feet was gone, replaced by a lifeless body. Finally, Amelia released the rope. She stepped back, her heart racing, her body trembling. Her breaths were short, almost frantic, as she tried to process what had just happened. The house was silent. The only sound was the rapid beating of her heart. As she stood there, staring at Mark's body, Amelia couldn't shake the reality of what she had just done. He was gone, and no matter how she felt about it, it was permanent. He would never hurt Sky again. Amelia let out a shaky breath and collapsed into a chair. Tears started to fall from her eyes, but they weren't for Mark. They were for Sky, for the child she had fought so hard to protect. Amelia had done this for her daughter, to give her the chance to live without fear. But even as the adrenaline began to wear off, Amelia knew this was just the beginning. What she had done could not be undone. There was no going back. Amelia stood over Mark's lifeless body, her heart racing, her thoughts clouded by the weight of what she had just done. The house was silent, too silent, as if it were holding its breath. She knew what had to be done next. She had to dispose of the body, quickly and quietly. The trunk of her car was the perfect place to hide Mark's body for now. She had planned every detail, every step. But even as she gathered herself for the task, she felt the weight of Mark's body, heavy and limp in her hands. It took everything she had to drag him from the kitchen and into the hallway. Her movements were slow but steady, and as she struggled to pull him across the floor, she reminded herself why she was doing this. It was for Sky. Mark would never hurt her again. The trunk of her car was already open, ready for what needed to happen next. Amelia wiped the sweat from her forehead, feeling the strain of moving his body. It wasn't easy. Mark was a large man, and every pull felt like a fight against time and the growing panic inside her. But she had to remain focused. She had to keep going. There was no turning back now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Amelia managed to get Mark's body into the trunk of the car. Her hands shook as she slammed the trunk shut, standing back to take a deep breath. She tried to steady her racing heart, but the adrenaline was still coursing through her veins. The hardest part was over. Now she had to dispose of the body, get rid of the evidence, and make sure no one ever found out what had happened. She started the car, her mind racing with the plan. She would drive to a remote location, somewhere no one would go, and leave Mark's body far away from her life, far away from Sky. She had already mapped out the route in her mind, a quiet spot in the woods, far from the city. It would be the perfect place to bury him. Amelia tried to focus on the road ahead, but every turn seemed to stretch on forever. The streets were empty, and the night was quiet, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened, and her eyes darted nervously to the rearview mirror. She couldn't let her guard down, not now. Suddenly, the flashing lights of a police car appeared in her rearview mirror. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had forgotten about the routine police checkpoints, something she had never had to worry about before. She knew the area well, and she knew they would stop her for a check. It was standard procedure, but tonight of all nights, it felt like a nightmare. She kept her breathing steady, trying to remain calm. Amelia knew that if she panicked, everything would fall apart. She pulled over to the side of the road, her palms sweating as she turned off the engine. The police car came to a stop behind her, and 2 officers stepped out. Amelia quickly straightened her posture, trying to look confident and composed. One of the officers approached her window and asked for her license and registration. Amelia handed them over without hesitation, her fingers trembling just slightly. "I'm Judge Amelia Miller," she said calmly, keeping her voice steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer nodded. "It's just a routine checkpoint, ma'am. We need to do a quick search of your car." Amelia nodded, trying to appear cooperative. She wasn't worried about the search. After all, there was nothing in the back seat. She had made sure of that. She just needed to get through this without raising any suspicion. "Of course," she said, her voice calm, but her mind racing. "Please, go ahead." The officer walked around to the back of the car and opened the back seat, looking inside for a moment before closing it again. Amelia watched nervously as the officer signaled to his partner. They were being thorough, but there was nothing to find. She just needed to get past the trunk. Once they finished with the back seat, they would be on their way. She hoped that would be the case. But the officer wasn't finished. He moved to the back of the car and looked at her again, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "they're going to need to check the trunk." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The trunk. She hadn't anticipated this. She had hoped they wouldn't go that far, but now it was too late to back out. Her heart pounded in her chest as she quickly tried to think of something to say, some excuse to stop them from opening it. But there was nothing. The officer was already walking around to the back of the car, and she knew she couldn't stop him. The officer opened the trunk, and Amelia's stomach dropped as he peered inside. His eyes widened in shock when he saw Mark's lifeless body sprawled across the trunk. For a moment, there was complete silence. Amelia felt her entire world crash down around her. The officers immediately took a step back, their hands reaching for their radios. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his voice firm and calm, but with a hint of disbelief. "We're going to need you to step out of the car." Amelia's mind raced, but her body felt numb. She couldn't believe it. After everything she had done, this was how it ended. She was caught. The moment she had been dreading had arrived, and there was no escaping it. The officers didn't give her a chance to speak. They handcuffed her and read her rights, and Amelia felt the weight of the reality settle in. She had tried to protect her daughter. She had done what she thought was necessary. But now, she was facing the consequences of her actions. As they placed her in the back of the police car, Amelia's thoughts were consumed with one question. How could everything have gone so wrong? Amelia sat silently in the back of the police car, her hands tightly cuffed. She wasn't scared. In fact, she felt strangely calm. What she had done was already done. Mark was gone, and her daughter was safe. That was all that mattered. When they arrived at the station, Amelia was led to an interrogation room. The harsh fluorescent lights above her made the room feel cold and impersonal. A detective, tall and stern-looking, walked in and sat across from her. "Amelia Miller," he said, his voice calm. "Do you know why you're here?" Amelia nodded. "Yes, I do." The detective set a folder on the table and looked at her. "Tell me what happened. Why did you kill your husband?" Amelia took a deep breath, her chest heavy. There was no point in lying. She had done what she had to do. "Mark was abusing my daughter. I found out, and I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." The detective paused, processing her words. "Tell me everything." Amelia didn't hesitate. "I didn't know at first, but when Sky came to me, told me what Mark had done, I couldn't let him get away with it. He would have used the system, manipulated it, and gotten away with it. I couldn't let him hurt her anymore." She looked him in the eye. "So I made sure he couldn't hurt her again. I killed him." There was a long silence. Detective Harris leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying her. "I understand your anger," he said after a moment. "But what you did, it's still murder. You didn't give the law a chance." Amelia didn't flinch. "I couldn't wait. I had to protect Sky." The detective's tone softened. "I get it. I do. But you can't take the law into your own hands." "I know," Amelia replied quietly. "But I did what I thought was right." The door opened, and another officer entered the room. He looked at Amelia, then at the detective. "She's sticking to her story," the officer said. Detective Harris nodded. "Amelia, you're going to be charged with murder. There's no getting around that. But we're listening. We're hearing you." Amelia didn't ask for mercy. She didn't beg for anything. She had made her decision, and now she would face the consequences. "I don't regret it," Amelia said calmly. "I did what I had to do to protect my daughter." The officer gave her a hard look, but said nothing. The detective stood up and gave her one final glance. "We'll continue the investigation. It's in the hands of the court now." Amelia was led out of the interrogation room. The truth was out. She had done what she felt was necessary, and now she would face whatever came next. She didn't know what the future held, but she was at peace knowing that Sky was safe. The news about Amelia's arrest spread quickly, and soon it was everywhere. The media covered her story nonstop. Some people supported Amelia, seeing her as a mother who did what was necessary to protect her child. Others believed that, as a judge, she should have followed the law and not taken matters into her own hands. The public was split. As the trial began, the courtroom was full of reporters and spectators. Amelia sat quietly, her face calm, but her mind heavy. The prosecutor argued that, no matter what Mark had done, Amelia should have used the legal system to bring him to justice. They said she had no right to kill him, and that it wasn't her job to decide his fate. Amelia's defense team, however, made a different argument. They said Amelia was a mother who was forced into a desperate situation. Her daughter, Sky, had been abused, and when Amelia found out, she felt there was no other way to protect her. They argued that Amelia was not acting as a judge in that moment, but as a mother protecting her child. Throughout the trial, Amelia remained calm. She didn't speak much and didn't try to explain her actions. She knew the consequences, but she felt she had done what she had to do. There was no anger or regret in her eyes, only the quiet acceptance of someone who had already made peace with her decision. Outside the courtroom, people were divided. Some showed support for Amelia, holding signs that read, "A mother's love knows no bounds." Others disagreed, saying things like the law is for everyone, and judges can't take the law into their own hands. The public debate raged on, with many wondering if Amelia was justified in her actions or if she had crossed a line that should not have been crossed. The trial moved forward, but Amelia's fate hung in the balance. Would the court see her as a mother who did what was necessary, or would they convict her for taking the law into her own hands? Only time would tell. After a tense trial, the judge delivers the final verdict. Amelia is sentenced to 5 years in prison. She listens quietly, accepting her sentence without showing regret. She knows what she did was for Sky's safety, and that brings her peace. There's no anger or sadness in her eyes, just calm acceptance. The court also rules that Sky's custody will go to Amelia's sister. She's a trusted family member, and Amelia knows that Sky will be safe with her. This decision eases Amelia's mind, knowing her daughter will be taken care of. As Amelia is escorted out of the courtroom, she takes one last look at Sky. The two share a brief moment. Sky, with tears in her eyes, whispers, "I love you, Mom." Amelia smiles softly, her heart full of love and relief. She knows she did the right thing, and that Sky is safe now. She walks towards her prison sentence with her head held high, knowing she protected her daughter the only way she could.